and so far it looks like we haven't dropped any frames, and it's been about 15 seconds. We're so far we're having a record. Um, so let me make this screen full size, and there we go. All right, well, I'm gonna send out another. I'm gonna make sure this is actually broadcasting like it's supposed to be. It looks like we got a few people on Periscope. Hello, everybody on Twitter. Um, And thanks to you, those of you who are joining us online on YouTube or Facebook as well. We got up to 6 people this morning, Saturday. Good morning. We are out here on the West Coast, and we tried to have this meetup on Thursday night, and Chris and I got together, and I just had some either major technical difficulties or bandwidth issues or a combination of all three. So we are trying it again and doing a little recording today to discuss what's been going on with Bitcoin Cash, and not only Bitcoin Cash from like the fork perspective, but also from like the development perspective. So Chris does a lot of work on in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem and has been putting together an amazing sets of tools for people and developers to use to build stuff on top of. And so part of why Bitcoin Cash still interests me, even though it hasn't garnered a whole lot of activity or traction, is that it kind of reminds me of Bitcoin in 2015. And now that we're getting, the ability to do smart contract related stuff on top of a Bitcoin-like system, I think this opens it up to a whole world of possibilities, that things that people had no idea was even possible using Bitcoin. um, so for people like me who remember colored coins and how awesome that was, the potential of that was going to be, and then Ethereum kind of came in and stole the thunder. Well, we're kind of back to that point with Bitcoin Cash to a degree, and there's some really cool stuff that's been going on. So I kind of want to just bring in uh, Chris now to introduce himself at this point, and then kind of take it away. We have a slide agenda from the meeting that we had posted the other day, but I think basically what we're looking at is that we're going to go through basically the technical the technical side of things a little bit, and then talk about the fork a little bit. Did I miss anything, Chris? Cool. All right. So at the end, I'll jump back in. I'll give any updates that we have from a community perspective. But in the meantime, I'm gonna stop video and switch over to make Chris full screen. Thanks for being here again, Chris. Appreciate taking the time out of your busy and secluded life. Oh, hold on. I got a freeze. I got a screen freeze with the WebEx. WebEx, why do you hate me so much? Well, we could use Zoom. The only problem is I don't have a paid version of Zoom, so after 40 minutes, we would be hosed. And it wants me to close WebEx. It like crashed. This is becoming a recurring problem with WebEx for me. I think this might be the end of WebEx, uh, as far as I know it, because stopping my video should not have crashed this. So apologies to all of you viewers online here. I'm going to end the meeting for a moment and restart it. All right, Chris, you're gonna have to join me on the other side. Just come back to the WebEx. All right, so sorry everybody. It's not what I was intending to have happen. So let me get back into the WebEx, which is not showing up my screen. Of course. Yeah, WebEx is gone. This is it. You are a piece of garbage. Um, I have had more problems with WebEx than anything, and I'm paying for it. So and now I'm paying for it, and all of you are paying for it because I have to deal with it live on stream. So that is annoying as hell. And we're gonna have to fix that. So let's see if in the meantime, maybe I can at least put, can I even get my camera up here? Video capture device 2, but I think it's because, no. Okay, well, that is ultra disappointing. Let's get into the calendar. And let's get back to the meeting. If we could get back to our calendar. It's not in the calendar. It is in the calendar. Thank God. What a disaster. As soon as you click live stream is when everything will go haywire. It never fails. If I was live streaming by myself, probably wouldn't have been a problem. But of course, because I'm doing it with someone, we are going to have these problems. So let's try this again. Joining the meeting. Okay. Let's see if this works now, right? Shouldn't be this difficult. But while you were gone, I was ranting about how WebEx is going to be getting the boot. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's hope this doesn't. Oh my God. Did it do it again? Yeah, it just completely timed out again when I tried to stop my video. What a piece of garbage. Uh, I would rather at this point just use Zoom and have to reconnect after 40 minutes because this is awful. Unless you have a paid version. Okay. So, all right, this is gonna kick us out because it's gonna quit on me, and then I will send you a Zoom, and I'm gonna restart the stream when, um, because this is just a disaster. All right, I'll catch you. Check your email for an invite. All right, see ya. Well, this is just a giant cluster today. I cannot apologize enough for what a disaster this has been. There's and it is now my restream is not even doing the right titles. I mean, this whole thing is just a giant cluster, even though I reset the titles. What is it doing? Um, okay, well, let's get the old Zoom going. I mean, you test everything, it works fine, you hit stream, and then everything goes to shit. It never fails. So you get to deal with my antics until we get this started. So copy invitation. Let's move this back out of the way. Join with computer audio. Let's start the video. Switch that. Okay. Hey, we're back. Let's get Chris in here. Copy the invitation. No. Telegram at this point, since I'm just afraid to open anything at this point anymore. The way it's been going, first the camera was working, and it's this. Always something. Never fails. I just can't turn on the computer and press go. I used to, for some reason. Okay, just broke. God, a piece of garbage. Okay, we're trying this again. Okay. Okay. Let's go. Turn this off for a second, give you guys a break. Okay. Still seems to be streaming. So that's good. We got a few people hanging in there. Appreciate it. Really sorry about this. Chris should be back with us any moment. And then we should get going. So I can put the old timer up here. Not needed. Hey. Okay. Well, I think we figured out what the problem was. It was me and WebEx. WebEx is a piece of garbage, so don't buy WebEx. Don't pay for WebEx, and don't use WebEx. That's our lesson of the morning. So apologies. Thanks for everybody who stayed tuned. While I was yelling at the computer and cursing under my breath. So hopefully some of you got what we were going to be doing today, which is going through what BitcoinCash has been up to, and opposed to me repeating myself, I'm going to just kick it over to Chris to introduce himself and then go into talking about the development changes or the development stuff that he's been working on for BitcoinCash and helping the community grow. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the fork. Please put in questions that you have, anything about BitcoinCash, directly into the chat, and I will put the chat on the screen. So I don't know if it'll overlay. So Chris, can you see? Probably can't see the chat, but that's okay. Yep, I'll do that. That sounds good. All right, I'm gonna stop my video and get out of your way here. Yeah. Let's see, maybe I have to do it in participants. Okay. I can. Shit.
Get to that shortly. So I've been in the Bitcoin Cash industry essentially, since it forked away from BTC on August 1st, 2017. And I started working at Bitcoin.com about 6 months later. And in the spring, I was hired to work on developer.bitcoin.com under Gabriel Cardona. And he created Bitbox and rest.bitcoin.com, which is a REST API. And so I worked with them for about 2 years. And then in March, I left and started fullstack.cash, which is based on the same idea of this idea of the cash stack. And so basically this cash stack is this idea of a stack comes from computer science. Like a lot of turning computer science into real life products uses a stack model to help engineers scale and identify where problems are when they occur. And so I took the same idea and applied it to Bitcoin Cash. And what the stack allows people to do is build modern phone apps and web applications that can talk to the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. So the stack is arranged with all the different layers that go from the blockchain at the bottom to your phone app at the top and all the middleware in between. So this is what I've been working on for the last 3 years. To step back even further, I was a very, very early Bitcoiner. I started mining Bitcoin with my home computer in early 2009, just shortly after the first version was released. And I actually managed to mine a block with my home computer back in those early days. And I still have a quarter of a Bitcoin. I'm not I'm an OG in the sense that I was there, but I wasn't like actively involved with the developers at the time. I was mostly just a lurker and a bystander. Got lucky and happened to mine a block with my home computer. This was like before GPUs or ASICs. And I do still have a quarter of a Bitcoin on a paper wallet, and it has every fork. That private key unlocks the same amount of Bitcoin on every fork of Bitcoin that's ever been created. And so that's pretty cool. I'll probably never cash that in. I'm probably just going to like pass that off to my nephews or something because I don't have kids. And anyway, so that's me. That's my background. That's where I'm coming from. I'm very focused on building developer tools and bringing Bitcoin into the modern, paradigm of making it just seamlessly interact with the blockchain from a web page or phone app. So that's me. That's what I'm working on. If you want more information, go to fullstack.cash. If there's any developers out there, particularly JavaScript developers, I strongly encourage you to check this out. It's very cool, very approachable tool set. And I'll come back to this if there's still time at the end, because I'd like to talk more about this, as well as the Permissionless Software Foundation, which is a community of JavaScript developers working on this. And I'd love to talk more about that. But if I don't get to it, please feel free to check it out. Go there. There's links to our Telegram channels where you can reach out to me. But let's get to the fork, because I'm sure that's the burning question on everybody's mind. And this is actually fortuitous that that our first meeting didn't work out, because in the last day, Bitcoin ABC just made a big announcement about the fork, which is kind of changes the entire conversation. In that there is almost for sure going to be a fork, and Bitcoin ABC is going to support both of them, or at least have full nodes for both of them. And before we get into the nitty gritty details, let's take a big step back and a high level overview. So Bitcoin ABC was started August 1st, 2017. That's when it forked away from BTC. And Omri Sachet was and always has been effectively the leader of the Bitcoin ABC organization. And there were other people that helped him fork at the time, but that's left ABC. But it objectively, you can say that Omri Sachet was the lead developer and the sort of instigator of the fork. And he it's always been his baby. So it's not like a bunch of random people got together and did it as a group. Like everything's really been focused on Henri Sachet. He's always been the technical sort of brain power, and even though there's been a lot of community participation, he's been the focal point. And Bitcoin ABC or Bitcoin Cash is really his baby. Like that's just historical, and it's important to understand why things are happening the way they're happening. So in the meantime, in the last 3 years, uh, Bitcoin ABC has been chronically underfunded, and when it came out, the reason why so much money and influence got behind the Bitcoin Cash idea was that there was a roadmap. There was a, in fact, I'll bring it up right here. Um, that's funny. Yeah, so there's this roadmap, and the green check marks at the top are things that have been accomplished in the last 3 years. The gears are things that are being worked on right now, and so there's this very clear, well-defined roadmap from the very beginning of how we, from where we started on August 1st and where we're going to create global digital cash for the world. And that's been the idea for the whole uh, time. And the understanding at the beginning was that this is going to require funding, and businesses are going to fund it. And it wasn't really like the funding wasn't really locked down. And anybody who's been in Bitcoin long enough knows that Bitcoin has no official governance. It's very anarchistic. The miners, everything's uses Nakamoto consensus, and it's so that Bitcoin has always suffered from a lack of governance or unclear governance, and Bitcoin Cash is no different. It inherited those problems, and so what we're seeing play out, or what I have seen play out over the last 3 years, and is coming to a head with this fork on November 15th, is this cognitive dissonance between two very different and very important philosophies behind governance and the development of the software. There is a large group of people who believe that this is an open source protocol, that no one there should not be a roadmap, that all development should be done voluntarily or through just economic actors paying specifically for their needs, and then everything will happen using market forces. And um, and I like that philosophy. I'm attracted to that philosophy. But then there's this other philosophy of where developers need to be paid, and there needs to be a roadmap. We're doing digital cash for the world, and this is a very serious endeavor that everybody's taking very seriously. There's objectives and roadmaps and lead developers, and everything is happening on a timeline with funding. And so these are two very different ideas of how to approach these problems. And these problems are much, much bigger than the Bitcoin space. They encompass the entire realm of open source software. A couple thought leaders that I've followed through the years on this topic is Mikhail Rogers, who uh, grew the Node. He was involved in the early days of the Node.js JavaScript programming language, and he's kind of famous for growing the contributor count of the Node.js project from, I think, like 3 to 300. So like like two order of magnitude growth. And um and then Nadia Ekbal, who is a researcher and has written several groundbreaking books on this ideas behind how do you fund open source and how do you organize people around an open source project. And I highly recommend both their work. Nadia just released a book called "Working in Public" a couple months ago, and it really speaks directly to some of these philosophical issues that are leading to the fork. So that's the backstory. So all of this has come to a head, and we've got so ABC has essentially led the development for the last 3 years, and there's a lot of people who don't like Henri Sachet, and they don't like this idea of a roadmap and this sort of structured development process. They want everything to be free and no leaders, and that's really what's come to a head. So uh, there's another full node implementation called BCHN, or Bitcoin Cash Network, and it's a fork of ABC. They forked it about 6 months ago. So it's just a copy of the ABC node software, and a new development team is maintaining it. They've since like completely forked off. They're not even backporting code changes from ABC. And so because ABC has had this chronic underfunding to accomplish, the original goals they set out to do, they did kind of a radical and very controversial move, which is to push 8% of the block reward. So people who are familiar with mining will know that when a miner finds a block, which happens on average every 10 minutes, they get some Bitcoin as a reward. And right now, I believe the reward is 6.25 Bitcoin. And so this change would make 8% of that 6.25 Bitcoin of every block go to Bitcoin ABC to fund the developers to continue development. And so it's a self-funding mechanism. And this is highly controversial because Bitcoin's never done this before. Bitcoin's never had a funding mechanism like this. So if you're steeped in the tradition, the culture of Bitcoin, which I use that word very lightly, culture, because it's only 12 years old. When we talk about culture, usually culture has been refined over hundreds of years. And so it's sort of asinine to talk about Bitcoin culture, which is only 12 years old. We're still all figuring it out. And a lot of people lose that perspective. But for better or worse, Bitcoin was created 12 years ago without any of this self-funding mechanism. And so that's why this change is so controversial. And it also, what it does is, to break it down even further, this 8%, 4% of it goes to Bitcoin ABC to do funding, and the other 4% goes to a global network council. It's a pretty cool system, and if you go to BitcoinCash.org, you can read the details. But there's the largest holders of Bitcoin Cash would cryptographically, prove for themselves and send a representative to these council meetings. And also the largest miners, or the miners who have mined the most blocks over like a time period, like a year, I think, they would also be represented and be able to send representatives. And so this council of people with skin in the game would have would oversee this half of the budget, 4% of the half of the 8%. So 4% would go to Bitcoin ABC, and 4% would go to this global network council. And because it's a SHA-256 hashing algorithm, and all the same miners can mine on BTC, on BSV, on BCH, and any other SHA-256 fork, the effective 8% it's really like 0.2% to the Bitcoin Cash network, because the majority of it gets paid by miners who switch between different chains. So anyways, I hope your eyes aren't glazed over.
No, no,
Chris, I
no.
see your video.
I popped back in because there was a question,
Oh,
and,
sure.
and I wanted to bring it up, which is kind of it ties into the governance kind of thing that
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about, which is, are you concerned that if this is from Lori Lord, if you are you concerned that if you start the process of paying developers, that it will attract government regulators?
That's a good question. I am not, because this is it doesn't bring Bitcoin into the realm of control by governments. I mean, one of the things that's attractive, at least from in the early days, that sort of libertarian mindset around Bitcoin, is that it's supra uh, money. It's non-state money, and because it uses all this decentralization and cryptographic techniques, it's largely beyond the reach of governments. If they could have stopped it, they would have stopped it by now. And so it's interesting that it could, like, I mean, that is a legit concern, right? Because like if there's one organization that gets this funding, that's a location for governments to apply pressure. But this is still open source software, and for me, in my mind, personally, this is the crux of the threat. Is if Bitcoin ABC was to ever like take their code private, and it was no longer open source or no longer under the MIT license, that would be a deal breaker for me personally. But if such a government entity applied pressure to Bitcoin ABC, it's still open source software, so all they can do is affect Bitcoin ABC. Like the software could always be forked, and the code can always be changed, and the governments can't control that. So hopefully I answered that question.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Yeah. So what I just explained was the technical objective reason for this fork, that ABC is introducing this 8% infrastructure funding plan, the IFP, and the other full nodes, or the community in general, like, are rejecting that because they feel it goes against the nature of Bitcoin. And I can see both sides. And the so now that I've shared the sort of objective things that are happening, let me share some of my subjective opinions, which are just mine, and you'll find plenty of people to disagree with me on these ideas. But I've worked very closely with Henri Sachet over the last couple of years, and and with the community, with the developer community. I've got friends on both sides of this thing, and I've tried very hard to understand everybody's perspective on this, and I get that this is a very non-Bitcoin move, that it does go against the Bitcoin culture, uh, and for that reason, I think that a fork should occur. I think there should definitely be a fork that has no IFP, no funding plan, Coinbase plan in it, and I think that Henri Sachet and ABC should have a chance to really, they've done. I feel like they've done an excellent job the last 3 years, and there's a lot of businesses who also feel they've done an excellent job, and I'd like to see them, get regular funding, and continue on this way. So I'm glad there's a fork. I want to see this fork. I think this is a long time coming. I think that this is like a philosophical schism that has been a long time coming, and it's finally playing out. And we're going to finally get two forks, that are following these two philosophical ideals, and we get to watch them both play out in the market. Um, Now, that doesn't help anybody who's invested and is worried about the price or the ticker symbol. That doesn't make people who are concerned with those feel any better. Um, so yeah, I'll definitely say that. There was something else I wanted to touch on. Oh yeah, so getting back to this sort of subjective thing, the thing that, if you really want to understand why this is happening, is that there's a large number of people in the ecosystem who just hate Henri Sachet. They just don't like him. They want him out of the community, and so this is their chance to do it. And fair enough. That's uh, but it's, what I'm pointing out is that you can't, like, that's a significant factor. People might downplay that, but it's a significant factor that has to be weighed in with all the objective, things that are happening. Um, so that's what's happening. So on the 15th, there's going to be a chain split. It looks like, the BitcoinCash ticker is going to remain with the BCHN network, and the BCHN is going to become the dominant full node, for miners, that miners run, and then there will be a new ABC fork. I don't know yet what the ticker is going to be for that, and that will be just primarily Bitcoin ABC running the show. They'll be funded. Um, One of the things that I really like about this funding plan is that if you think about it in terms of like gold miners, it kind of logically makes sense that, if you think back to the old gold rush days, like, of course, it makes sense if a miner goes out and finds gold, they would then use that gold to buy the picks and the shovels, and the jeans and the shirts and the frying pans and the whatever that pan is used to find gold. Uh, it would make sense that they would pay for those things in the gold that they found. Like that, of course. Like, that's how it happened, and why wouldn't it happen that way? And so in my mind, that's exactly what's happening here. Is the miners are paying the developers in the Coinbase reward for building the software that the miners run. So that makes sense to me. And it makes sense to a lot of people, even though that's not how it was originally created.
So I got another comment here that I want to read off to you. It says, uh, a Bitcoin Cash node, BCHN, is proof that ABC proposal for governance works. And then follows up by saying the ability to fork away from a bad core node has been demonstrated.
Hmm.
Can you ask Chris what he thinks about that?
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I wouldn't call ABC a bad actor. I think this is really just comes down to two different philosophies and this cognitive dissonance that's caused a lot of drama over the last 3 years, and we're finally seeing some resolution to this cognitive dissonance. And I think it is good. I think it is good that uh, a community is not sort of held ransom by the ideals of one full node, even if I do tend to agree with their focus. Now, the counter to that uh, is that is that the Bitcoin Cash was essentially created by Henri Sachet, was definitely created by Bitcoin ABC, and so now that they have left the space, Bitcoin Cash is going to have to spend the next year redefining itself and figuring out what it means to not have this strong leader with a clear path forward and the reliability of that provides. I because I've worked so closely with ABC the last couple of years and I've seen firsthand their focus on quality control. I don't see that same attention to detail in any of the other full node implementations. And Johannes Vermorel, I'm probably butchering his name, he's French. He had a great YouTube video on this. He's a what he does, what his company does is it analyzes software companies um, before they're purchased by a larger company. They sort of assess technical debt and leadership. And he had an excellent video speaking to these points. So over the next year, we're going to have to see how things play out with these full node implementations that aren't quite so focused on quality control. There have been issues in the past. I expect there will be issues going forward. Now, one advantage is that we have several different full node implementations. So if one goes down, that doesn't mean they all go down. But the reality is that we typically have seen one implementation used by the vast majority of miners. That's been Bitcoin ABC in the past. It's going to be BCHN going forward. So it's not like there's a good an even distribution of full node implementations being run by miners. Miners still pretty much only one implementation. It doesn't look like that's going to change. So if there's a problem with BCHN, that means all the miners have the same problem. So we're just going to have to see how it plays out. And I think that this point is what the market is largely missing because you don't see it on the face. You don't see the attention to detail and the quality control. But we're going to have to see how it plays out. Like I honestly do want to see both forks or both chains exist, and I want to see how this plays out. And that's what we're going to have to do. We're just going to have to see how it all plays out. If we're going to find out, or the market is going to find out which is better, which idea is better, a more decentralized development that's based on donations and does not have a roadmap, and anybody can create a full node implementation versus a chain that has a reference implementation, a focus on software quality, and has this self-funding mechanism that aligns the development teams, the miners, and the large holders to all improve and scale the technology. So I don't know who's going to win, and I'm excited to find out. And this might be a good segue for me to get back into fullstack.cash and describe how I'm going to support both chains and help developers build on both chains. But if there's any other questions about the fork, this would be a good time to ask them.
Yeah, so one sort of about the fork is what happens. if an exchange will not list or support the other fork?
Well, obviously, a lack of liquidity is going to hurt the price of a coin. But I think in the current, like what's happening right now is exchanges are essentially deciding who gets the ticker, and so that's going to clearly benefit whoever gets the ticker. I don't think it means that no one is going to trade the ABC coin. I think it just means that it's going to take time for it to get a new ticker and for new exchanges to start trading it. Um, Exchanges typically don't. Uh, well, I know that exchanges do not want to pick winners and losers. They just want to trade coins because they get money through volume. But unfortunately, in these types of events, they are forced to pick winners and losers, and that's why it gets so chaotic because there's so much money on the line, and no one wants to be, no one is effectively can be the winner. It's all just kind of has to sort itself out chaotically, like we're seeing.
Yeah, to that point, I think it also goes the same thing kind of goes for what we're seeing from like hardware operators like wallets and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're sitting on the fence and they're saying we're not doing anything until there's a clear cut way for us to figure out what we need to do from a technical perspective. And they don't want to be running around like chickens with their heads cut off um, until they need to.
Yeah, and to represent the contrarian viewpoint, because the ABC chain is going to have this global network council that oversees 4% of the funds for marketing and research. There is an incentive if the price of ABC just completely plummets, like let's say it's $10 a coin, there's going to be a big incentive for people to buy the cheap coins so that they can have a seat at the Global Network Council.
Interesting. Yeah. So you're right. It really is a who knows how it's going to play out, and we're in uncharted territory. So we just kind of need to see what goes. One question popped up here at the end. Would it? I don't know. This is probably not a good a good way to. This is well, whatever our answers are going to be. It will not be investment advice.
Yeah.
But would it be a good investment decision to invest right before a split? This has been a question that's come up multiple times along the way
Hmm.
because people think, oh, I'm getting extra coins.
Right.
So, uh, so yes, to a degree, I will say it really depends on what the outcome is. So, like you said, if there's no liquidity, then it's going to be really difficult for someone um, to be able to take advantage of any type of profit or loss, really, because by the time you actually get to trade them, it may be too late.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been looking back at the price charts during the Bitcoin SV fork, and I don't know if that's a good. I mean, we have no idea if history is going to repeat itself. It's one data point that does not make a trend. But what happened during the Bitcoin SV fork is there is actually a price spike prior to the fork, just like there kind of is right now, and then the price plummeted shortly after the fork, and it went all the way down to $80. And I remember just like thinking, like, oh man, I should totally buy this, but like that's scary. And hindsight 2020, but yeah, I mean, I can tell you what I'm doing personally is I have some Bitcoin Cash that I just have a set aside because I learned, because I have this quarter Bitcoin from like 9 years ago, and it, not only do I have the BTC on it, I have every fork of BTC that's happened in the last 9 years on it. And so I've learned that like there's a huge advantage for just holding through all this stuff for like the next, just put it away for 20 years and forget about it. And so I have some Bitcoin Cash set aside that I'm taking that same approach on. And then if history repeats itself and the price goes down significantly shortly after the fork, I'm going to buy both because I can't pick a winner. I'm not going to engage in the hubris of thinking that I can pick a winner. I'm just going to buy low and try and sell high.
Yeah, I usually lose when I try to pick the winner too.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't go to the horse track. Um, but yeah, I think that's a very good um, set of you know things to think about and an approach to take that is like this is what I've been saying the whole time, even when the first fork happened. Like if you could tell me in 10 years that you know for a fact that one of them is going to win, then sure, I'd go all in. But nobody knows. And so at least for me, it's good to diversify. And if
Yeah.
you can pay attention, like you said, there might be some opportunities after the fact. So you might be paying a premium if you're buying it before, and you might be able to swoop up cheap coins afterwards. So although
Hmm.
we never, who knows what's going to happen? Just because
Hmm.
it's happened that way in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen that way in the future. But yeah, I think this is a good segue directly back into full stack cash.
Yeah. And so let me talk, instead of talking about, you know, Bitcoin as money and should you buy or should you sell, I'm
Hmm.
more interested in what you can do with it. I've always been like, I've always looked, I was originally uh, inspired by Bitcoin. The reason I mined it so early was I didn't care about the money application. I cared about the uncensorability of a blockchain.
Yeah,
And so,
to that point, will you go over like kind of your unstoppable website uh,
mhm.
today too? Okay, cool.
Yeah, definitely. So what Chris was referring to is at troutsblog.com is my personal blog, and it's built on this uncensorable publishing technology that I've created. Uh, and I've sort of repackaged that at uncensorablepublishing.com. And so, what this is in a nutshell is it's a combination of the Bitcoin Cash blockchain and the interplanetary file system, IPFS, which you can check out at ipfs.io if you've never heard of it before. These are both very different technologies that are based on cryptography, and they've both shown that they're nearly impossible for governments to stop, to censor. And so I'm very interested with all the turmoil. You know, we just had the 2020 presidential election. Everybody's very aware right now of just sort of uh, the volatility of our culture. Nobody knows kind of what's going to happen. I'm really worried about our society descending back into like a Holocaust type of situation, or just the government's violating our innate rights to privacy and free speech. We've seen over the last years that the governments are not doing a good job at uh, at protecting and defending our rights to privacy and free speech. But the good news is that we have things like blockchain and cryptography so that we as individuals can enforce our rights to privacy and free speech. And we do not need to rely on the government to protect it for us. I mean, it'd be nice if they did, but if they fail to do that, it is actually within our power to take our rights and enforce them ourselves. And so uncensorablepublishing.com has some videos on how to like build a website once and then distribute it over different networks. The clear web that we're all familiar with, the Tor network, as well as the interplanetary file system, IPFS. These are all independent networks. They all, so this is the difference between the internet and the web. The web is like what happens in your web browser. Uh, but the internet is much bigger than the web. It includes Tor, it includes the IPFS network, it includes several other types of networks, and that's what's known as the deep web because Google only searches the web. It does not touch IPFS or Tor or some of these other more exotic networks. The engine. So so for people who are interested in this, I recommend you go to uncensorablepublishing.com. But to stick with this theme of right to privacy, right to free speech, so fullstack.cash that I showed earlier is a framework for building modern applications that talk to the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. And a big part of this also is talking to the interplanetary file system, because those two technologies complement one another a lot. And a lot of what I've done over the last 3 years is pioneering some of this technology of mating blockchain with IPFS, um, which makes some very powerful, uncensorable uh, technology. And so uh, fullstack.cash is honestly not that interesting if you're not a back-end developer. So I'm not going to go into that in this meeting because that might just make your eyes glaze over. What I'm going to talk about instead is the block at the top that says your app. These are some examples of the apps that you can build with the fullstack.cash infrastructure. This is wallet.fullstack.cash. Um, it's a Bitcoin Cash wallet. It holds tokens. You can send and receive tokens on. For those who don't know, we have tokens on Bitcoin Cash. It's known as the Simple Ledger Protocol, or SLP token. And anyways, this is a wallet. You can go to wallet.fullstack.cash. Go to the wallet menu item. There will be a button, create new wallet. Notice the big red alpha sign. This is prototype software. So don't put significant amounts of money, like less than $1. Anyways, you can create a wallet. You can send and receive tokens. If you want to send me your simple ledger, you can go to, if you do create a wallet, you can go to the send receive tab, and you can get a Bitcoin Cash address and a simple ledger address. And if you want to reach out to me and send these to me, I'll send you some tokens just so you can play with them and see how they work. But this allows you to send and receive. And what's cool about this technology is that it's a web app. So everybody is into phone apps, but phone apps have always been a walled garden. The Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, they can take your app out like that. And that's a feature, not a bug. But if you build a web app, no one gets to tell you what you can and can't do. And so this is why I'm more focused on web app technology. Um, Another one that we're working on that I'm very excited about is message.fullstack.cash. Now this is really what I'm talking about. This is a combination of Bitcoin Cash and the interplanetary file system to allow people to send uh, end-to-end encrypted messages uh, to one another. And so when you're talking about this level of communication, there's two important concepts. One is the encryption. Like, is it end-to-end encrypted so that it can't be intercepted in transit and like by a state actor? And that's important. But you also need to be able to get the message to someone. If you wanted to send, say, a message to a protester in Hong Kong, or even more intensely, like someone in mainland China behind the Great Chinese Firewall, you're probably not going to get the message to them. It doesn't matter if it's encrypted or not. Like, you're just not going to be able to get the communication to them. And so that's where the interplanetary file system comes in. I've actually tested this in real life with people in China that, for instance, wallet.fullstack.cash is blocked from people in mainland China. They're not allowed to access it. But I had a there. If you scroll down to the footer, I have a link here where you can access the app over the interplanetary file system, and she was able to access it that way. And so the IPFS is very subversive. It's really good at getting around firewalls, and it's like smoke. Every time you try and stop it, it just gets around you. And anyway, so this very ugly prototype I'm showing on my screen is message.fullstack.cash. These are messages that people have come to me. It's very rough. The UI is ugly. You're looking at some Bitcoin Cash addresses. These need to be replaced with clear text names. We're working on all that. But the core technology is in place now, where anybody who, like, the workflow is really cool. Like, let's say that you're in mainland China and you find out that the coronavirus was actually released by a lab, and you have some information. You want to get it out there. Or maybe that famous doctor who died, who was the first one to leak it. Um, uh, let's say he wanted to get that message out here, and he was tech savvy enough and knew that these things existed. He could somehow find someone with some Bitcoin Cash in the world, anybody, and be like, yeah, send me like 10 cents and I'll send you this information. He could go to this web page, which again is accessible over IPFS, so the Chinese government can't stop it. Generate a Bitcoin Cash address, send that Bitcoin Cash address to whoever he needs to communicate with. They can send him, some money. 10 cents is all is required. Again, government can't stop that from happening because it's on the blockchain. So then he's got money. Now he can use it to send one of these messages. What happens is the message gets encrypted and uploaded to the IPFS network. And then just the subject line uh, gets written to the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. So a very small amount of data that's pointing to the payload on the IPFS network. And so this is how I'm sort of marrying these two technologies. So very small, very cheap amount of data gets written to the blockchain, which can't be stopped or censored. And then the recipient who gets this sort of notification, this application would then go to the IPFS network, download that content, which is, again, is very hard to censor, and they're the only ones that can decrypt it because it's encrypted with their private key. And the way this works is anybody who's used email to send encrypted messaging will know that it's a very high friction thing because you can't just send someone an encrypted email. You have to first have them generate a public key and give you the public key. That process is why we don't have end-to-end email, because it's a very high friction process and there's no good user experience to get around that. The blockchain solves this problem because your public key is on the blockchain. I don't need to ask you for your public key. This app can just go to the blockchain and find the public key for your address because this is the same core technology that Bitcoin uses. So I can send you a message that's encrypted that only you can decrypt, and I don't have to have any communication with you before doing that. I can just do that. I can just send you an encrypted message, and that only you can access. And so I think this is a game changer. I'm really fired up about this technology. Again, this user interface is super rough, but it is functional. And so at this point, it's just a matter of making the user interface look better. So this is what I'm excited about. Like this is why I don't have a big dog in the fight on like who wins the ticker and who ends up being global money for the world. Like that's important, and I'm definitely gonna like bet on a few horses in that race. But I'm more concerned with how can we use cryptocurrencies and cryptography in general to, as individuals, to enforce our private rights. Regardless of, I don't know if anybody's seen that meme of like four guys beating a guy with a stick, and the caption is like 4 out of 5 people love democracy. There's this concept of the tyranny of the majority, and we're definitely seeing that play out right now in the presidential election. What if we lived in a world where everybody gets what they want, where the majority can have their blockchain and the minority can fork off and have their blockchain? This is what I'm talking about. Like, as an individual, you can have the power, you can take the action, and no one needs to suffer because of that. Like, we can all have our cake and eat it too in this particular regard when it comes to privacy and free speech. So how are we looking on time there, Chris? Zoom going to kick us off pretty soon? Oh, I might have lost him. Well, let me share a few
No,
more
that's a
things.
good question. I'm not exactly sure. It usually tells me 10 minutes before it does it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um, so probably in the next 5 or 6 minutes, I would imagine it'll probably say something.
Okay.
But
Well,
I'll
I
give
can go
you a
into
warning. I'll give you a
okay, I can
heads
go
up.
into a few more details, but I was kind of on a soapbox there for a minute. So if there's anybody with questions or comments.
Um, I mean, personally, there wasn't anything that it came up in the chat, but I have a question, and that is, um, how easy is it to use IPFS right now? Like as a developer to like host things, use them, recall them. Like
Mhm.
is that an issue right now? Like is it not as easy as using traditional storage and databases?
So for non-developers, it's nearly impossible. For developers, it's getting better. The biggest stumbling block that I stumbled with, and I constantly see other developers stumble with when it comes to IPFS, is it probably doesn't work the way you think it works. Like, a lot of people think like oh, I can just like these files are just hosted somewhere, and they're not. Like you still have to be responsible for connecting your node to the nodes you want it to be connected to. It doesn't just happen magically, and someone has to have the content. Like it won't just magically take care of itself. But this is Filecoin just launched their mainnet a couple weeks ago, and that is the problem that Filecoin was designed to solve, is this: who has the content, like who's hosting the content. So you can pay in Filecoin and let the network host the content, and so then everything just sort of magically happens. And this is a big step forward in terms of uh, decentralization, because the past 3 years or so, these pinning services have gotten very popular. So they're a centralized service, and you pay them to host the file on the IPFS network. But they're the ones; they're like sort of the holder of last resort of the content, and that's what Filecoin. But because it's a centralized service, they're subject to DMCA takedowns. They're a central point for governance to apply force. And so Filecoin changes the game, because now you can pay up front for the next 10 years.
Hmm.
I want at least 3 people to host this content. Here's my money. I pay up front,
Like a
and the
bounty.
network ensures that that happens. And there's no like central party for the government to, or a government to attack in that regard. So it makes this content hosting decentralized.
So
And
you
I'm
put
I'm
you
really
put up a
excited about that.
bounty essentially, right? For people
Yeah.
to host your content for you.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
And you kind of and you're prepaying essentially.
Right. Right.
So is Filecoin? I haven't been following. I know I heard the announcement, but um, it doesn't. It's not on IPFS, right? They're their own system, right?
Yeah,
Similar,
there
similar
there's a
concept.
very close connection. So yeah, just because the content's on Filecoin doesn't mean you can retrieve it with IPFS. That's a subtle thing that people forget. There's going to be this whole retrieval market, which they're still nailing down that. I mean, anybody can fire up a Filecoin full node and retrieve the content that way. And there are already services like Slate and Infura that have APIs to retrieve content from the file network. So all that exists already. Um, but uh, um, but yeah, it's not a direct connection between Filecoin and IPFS. There's a retrieval step that has to take place.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
This is
And
no, this is fascinating stuff because there's a lot being built right now. So what are you personally working on most right now? Where are you spending your time?
yeah, well, that's a good segue into the Permissionless Software Foundation. So, I started this. It's been a brainchild of mine for a couple years, but it really kind of launched in on March, and this is a like the tagline says, it's open source incentivized with tokens. So this idea of how do you, this big question of how do you fund open source development sustainably over time is a big question. I mean, hopefully people have heard of the heartbleed bug. That was the thing that really brought this, like,
Yeah.
there's this common saying that software is eating the world, and most of that software is open source. And so all this open source software that our world depends on now is like just completely unmaintained for the most part. And it leads to these big problems like the heartbleed bug, which was a problem in the encryption used by virtually every website on the internet. And it turned out that there was like one guy that was employed part-time to deal with this critical piece of infrastructure that, like, every bank website used this software. Every single bank website in the world used this software. uh, uh, and there's one guy employed part-time to take care of it. So that was like the poster child for this problem, but it's fractal, it's everywhere. And so I mentioned Roger, Mikhail Rogers and Nadia Ekbal as these sort of thought leaders in this area that I follow. So this is my attempt to solve this problem. And so we have a token, an SLP token on the Bitcoin Cash network. It's currently trading at about 15 cents. And so it's not in an exchange. You go to this website, psfoundation.cash, to buy or sell it. And notice the big yellow warning sign that this should not be considered an investment. It's not. They're I'm not going to go into the weeds here because you can go to this website and watch the video and read the business plan if you want to know about it. But there's very little speculative gains that can be accomplished with this token, and that's a feature, not a bug. This is meant to be a utility token. It's transactional, so people who want to see certain types of software built, like wallet.fullstack.cash and message.fullstack.cash, they buy these tokens with the knowledge that their money is going to be spent on developers. Right now, we've got about half a dozen developers. Most of them are located in South America. So we've got two of our lead developers are in Venezuela. One of our junior developers is in Argentina. And so they're able to develop software on a very frugal budget because like $10 an hour is a sweet paycheck to someone in Venezuela. And so it's a win-win-win situation. The people who want to see software like message.fullstack.cash exist can get it at a very low cost, and then the developers can work from virtually anywhere in the world, including repressed economies like Venezuela and Argentina, and make a good income. And the idea here, there's three main aspects to the Permissionless Software Foundation. So this signified by this animated gear that I have on the screen. So the big gear is code, because code drives everything. This is a software project, and it's all about it's a developer community. There are non-developers in the community, but it's the focus is on developers and JavaScript in particular, and solving some of these big hairy problems like enforcing the right to privacy and free speech with code. And so we're building a series of what we call vending machines. So wallet.fullstack.cash is an example of that. Message.fullstack.cash is an example of that. They're apps that do something valuable, and they're coin operated. You put some money in, you get something out, and there's no real human interaction. Everything's automated. So you can send and receive Bitcoin Cash. You can send and receive private messages. That's what I'm talking about, like a fully automated, coin operated vending machine. We do this consulting thing where people who have businesses who want something specifically built, we might partner with them in order to build it, and that's more expensive. It's more focused, and that's a good sort of income stream for the community. And then there's the foundational aspect of it, or the community aspect of it. So every 3 months we have an airdrop, but it's not like a normal airdrop. People who have held their PSF tokens without moving them for 2 months are eligible for this airdrop. That's the sort of scarcity there. That's the investment. It's not so much a big investment of money as it is an investment of time. You have to like sort of display your dedication by holding these tokens and not moving them. And if you've done that, you'll receive a funding token, and then that token itself doesn't have any value. But what you can do with it is spend it on grants. So I'll show the grants page that we just had our last funding round on November 1st. It concluded on November 1st. So every 3 months we do this, and we have a series of projects, bounties, and people. And so what the token holders in the community do is they receive this funding token, and then they send it to one of these. It has no marketable value. They can't do anything with it other than essentially cast their vote onto the projects, bounties, or people that they want to see funded. And then at the conclusion, their tokens are matched with newly minted PSF tokens. And so that's how this is like the feedback mechanism between people who hold the token, how they direct funds towards development work. And and so the idea is that if we collectively are good about funding development work, then the usability and value of the software created goes up, more people use it. And what I haven't talked about is the token burning. And that's what closes the loop, is when someone uses wallet.fullstack.cash or message.fullstack.cash, they're going to pay a small amount, like in wallet.fullstack.cash, it's 2,000 Satoshis, which is a little bit less than half a cent. And that goes to burn tokens, take tokens out of circulation. And with message.fullstack.cash, I think you pay a penny to have the files hosted on IPFS, and that also goes to burn tokens. Or if you have a subscription on fullstack.cash to access our infrastructure, that goes. And so these tokens are burned and taken out of circulation. So what we have is a process for bringing tokens into circulation and into the hands of the developers, and then the tokens are taken out of circulation. So we have this supply and demand, and so there is a core management of fullstack.cash, and they're sort of in charge of managing the supply and demand. And the thing is they are also, which I mean includes me and includes a few other people, but we're also subject to this process. So if we're not doing a good job, the token holders simply do not fund us, and that's how they effectively fire us. And anybody who wants to step up and be a better manager is free to do so. And so this is a blunt process, and we're one of the things we're doing with message.fullstack.cash is this community feed. And this is also a blockchain based communication feed. And so all these messages are on the blockchain, and it's actually based on memo.cash. And I really encourage people to check out that site. It's Twitter, but it's on the blockchain. So you can't be deplatformed. And you can't be censored. People can block you, which is a good thing for individuals to do. But you can't be deplatformed or censored because the data is on the blockchain. Other than that, it's basically Twitter. So this piggybacks on top of that, and we're trying to give our community a voice. And so we're pioneering this interesting concept called merit. So not only, in order for your message to show up here, not only does your message have to have hold PSF tokens, it also we calculate a value called merit, which is the quantity of the tokens you have multiplied by the age of those tokens. And we can look at both of those because it's on the blockchain. So quantity times age equals merit. And so you get this nice number, and you can see it in the badges here on the right. The merit is like the star. And so in this feed, you'll be able to see who has the most merit, and it's a signal as to like, well, this person's merit is higher. They're more worth listening to. And again, this user interface is super rough. It was brand new prototype stuff. And it's what it is it's a type of spam prevention. We can dial up the merit if it gets too noisy. We can just dial up the merit, and everything that doesn't have enough merit falls off the list. So we can take the same blockchain data, and we can have like an everybody feed where it's a free for all, and we can have like a VIP feed where we really crank up the merit, and the source of the data is the same. The only thing you're changing is the filtering on the front end. And it's this idea of token age is interesting because someone who doesn't own a lot of tokens but has held them over a significant period of time, they can have their voice heard on equal footing with someone who just comes in and buys a ton of tokens but hasn't had them for very long. So it's a really interesting social dynamic, and I'm excited to see how we can polish this, and how how it plays out, and how we can give the community members with more skin in the game a better voice.
And this is all PSF tokens that you were talking about, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So um, just to kind of put things all to kind of tie things all together, the the PSF token is kind of the underlying like uh, economic incentivizer for the community around full stack cash
Yeah, yeah.
and
It's
for the projects and the people. And then it has this other component built into it about um, being able to kind of God, I don't even know what the right was. Such kind of such a revolutionary um, concept. But
there's a
it,
lot here to wrap your mind around.
yeah. So, but it is all tied to the full stack. I want people to make sure that they understand that this is tied to the full stack cache, like
Hmm.
ecosystem. And and so when you're talking about the tokens, you're not talking about Bitcoin Cash per se. You're talking about PSF tokens. And so the burning of tokens you were talking about was PSF tokens being burnt, not Bitcoin Cash being burnt.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So one of the things I want to emphasize here that I haven't mentioned is the PSF token. One of the things I hate about sort of all these tokens that exist right now is like it adds this huge level of friction to the user experience of like, wait, I like Filecoin. Like, how do I even get a Filecoin? Like, I don't know. Um, and and so these vending machines that I talked about before, you do not have to have tokens to interact with them. Like wallet.fullstack.cash, it just uses Bitcoin Cash. You don't need to know about tokens. You don't need to care about tokens. Fullstack.cash is a subscription service. You pay for it in Bitcoin Cash. The end users do not need to know or use tokens. So what happens is, so we don't want to force users to use the token. It's really just for the people in the community who do want to know and care about the token. And so what happens is when you use our vending machines or our consulting or whatever, uh, all that money, which is in Bitcoin Cash, it's not in tokens, it goes to this burn address. And what happens is that Bitcoin Cash gets forwarded on to an automated system that burns the tokens.
Okay.
So the result is that end users do not need to know or care about our token. The token really is just for the community, and that's how you know if you're in the community or not in the community. This is another, like, going back to the fork, and in open source in general. Again, this is not limited to cryptocurrency. Uh, Defining community is very difficult. How do you know if someone's a member of the community or not? Like, that is a very vague question, but we make that very clear. If you own PSF tokens, you are a member of the community, and the quantity and age of those tokens defines your merit within the community. And so we've tried to make, that's one of
Okay.
the advantages of what we're doing, is it makes a very bright line.
Cool. All right. Got it. Thanks for making that clear.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, man, I hope people are fascinated by this. I mean, we are an inclusive community. I mean, the focus is on JavaScript, but really anybody who cares about these kinds of issues of like enforcing your rights to free speech and privacy, like you're welcome to the community. I've got a video if people want to know more, that they can watch where it's a little dry. It's me talking for like a half hour about these sort of dry subjects, but I guess whether it's dry or not just depends on your political orientation.
Yeah, no, I think if you're still here watching or if you've made it this far through the video, then you probably want to learn more. So, yeah, definitely go check this out. Um, I haven't had any questions for a while, so um, I'm not sure what else it is that you wanted to cover today. Was there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to discuss?
Um, yeah, let me just briefly talk about the DevCon that
Oh
happened.
yeah, please. Yep.
That was in September, and it was pretty cool. It was the second virtual hackathon that we've had in the Bitcoin Cash space, and it was a great time because there was still a lot of like drama happening around this fork, and we were able to, for the most part, come together and make it happen. And the hackathons are great because they bring developers from outside the Bitcoin Cash space into the Bitcoin Cash space. That's why hackathons are so important for any cryptocurrency. And we had $15,000 in prizes. I think we had 16 different contestants. some of the stuff that was built was incredible, because there was a huge focus on this idea of I mean, Bitcoin in its early days before it had a price, it attracted people like me who are libertarian and anarcho-capitalist, and they believe that they have an inherent right to free speech and privacy, and they want to enforce that. And so we saw a lot of projects. That's why I'm in the Bitcoin Cash space, because in general, it's full of people with that. I mean, that's they maintain that original like mentality with Bitcoin, and there was a lot of projects. There was the one I was most excited about was CoinJoin for SLP tokens. So for people who don't know CoinJoin, it's a way of it's financial privacy. Like Bitcoin's not a privacy coin. It's not. If you buy a coin from Bitcoin from Coinbase, they can track everything you do with that Bitcoin because they have your name and they have your addresses, and they can use the blockchain to follow the trail of money. So what CoinJoin does is it breaks those informational connections, and it anonymizes your coins, the same way that like U.S. dollars cash is. Like if I go and I pay somebody with $5 cash, nobody but me and that person knows that the transaction happened. And a lot of people feel like that's how it should be. That's why Bitcoin Cash is trying to be digital cash for the world. Like that sort of anonymous transaction is implied by using the word cash, and so someone for the first time, a woman named Anastasia and her group created a an SLP coin join. So not only can you do this privacy protocol on Bitcoin, you can also employ that privacy protocol with the tokens. And so that was pretty cool because that had been an open question if we were going to lose our privacy by this new token economy.
So
Um,
I'm glad you brought that up because part of
mhm,
the time what I do is crypto fraud investigations for people who have been scammed.
mm,
So I actually use some of that software that you're talking about, and I am able to like follow and trace things, and I see things. And believe it or not, right, most criminals are still using Bitcoin, and
mhm,
they're not really using coin joins. But to the
mhm,
point too, or mixers. So the point though, what I'm wondering about is these coin joins and mixers. Like I actually traced some coins through a coin join because they were sloppy about how they did it. So
mhm,
like has the technology that is being used on Bitcoin Cash been audited? And are you sure that like the coin join is really working? And what is the ability to actually trace through one of these coin joins? Is it actually as secure as you think? Because these guys thought they were using it, and they obviously
mhm.
didn't mix enough or join enough before they moved out. And I was able to see uh, like a like
A connection.
a connection between two different wallets and then an out to an exchange. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, that was lucky. But so that's why I was wondering from like that perspective, like, yes, it's supposed to be safe, and yes, it's supposed to add this privacy and protection, but is it really? And do you think in the future we're going to see most of the chains eventually adopt some sort of obfuscation of transactions?
Yeah. So I'll try not to get too deep into the weeds, but that's going to be hard. Um, so one reason why CoinJoin is not widely deployed on Bitcoin, BTC, there is Wasabi Wallet, and they do a great. I think they do as good of a job as you possibly can on the BTC network, but because the transaction fees are so high and the confirmation times are so long, it makes it very difficult to do these sorts of privacy enhancing transactions. It makes them very expensive and very slow. On Bitcoin Cash, we don't have that problem because the transaction fees are tiny, like less than like I think it's 1/20th of a cent generally, and and so you can do many more transactions. And the thing about coin join transactions is the more you do, the better it is for your privacy, the harder they are to track. There is this problem called the dust problem, which is you get these tiny little amounts of Bitcoin that have high informational content, and a lot of people, they don't want to throw them away, even if they know it's bad. And most of the time, people they just don't want to think about privacy, and that's why it's so important to get privacy baked into a protocol, rather than relying on the user to do things right or wrong.
Right.
And so on Bitcoin Cash, we have two different types of coin join protocols. We have Cash Shuffle, which was the first one, and both of these are enabled in the Electron Cash desktop wallet. So if you want to try them out, it's electroncash.org. And so Cash Shuffle was the first one, and it has been audited. Both of these protocols have been audited by Trail of Bits, and Cash Shuffle was great. It was a really great step in the right direction. I love it, but it does suffer from that dust problem. You end up with small amounts of Bitcoin Cash that have high informational content, and it's very easy for users to sort of screw up the whole thing by messing around with these little pieces of dust. Um, and
Once you start to
so,
consolidate that dust, right, then it
exactly.
reconnects everything, right?
Exactly. So it was a good step, but it wasn't. It was good. Like if you just want to buy a cup of coffee and you don't want the merchant to be able to see your entire financial history, it's great for that. But it won't stand up to a state actor. And we now have Cash Fusion, which will stand up to a state actor, but I personally don't like it, just because the way it works is it does these huge transactions with hundreds of inputs and outputs, and what you end up with in your wallet is all these tiny little pieces of anonymous coins, and as a person, as a developer who creates wallet software, it's very unappealing, because what I want is to end up with large anonymous coins, not tons of tiny anonymous coins. A From an end user standpoint, there's really no difference. So it exists. You can use it. It works. It can stand up to a state attack or a state actor. It has been audited. So if anybody watching this is interested in financial privacy, I encourage you to do it. One of the research projects that has been funded at the Permissionless Software Foundation is a new coin join protocol that we're working on called collaborative coin join. Consolidating coin join was an old protocol and turned out to be a bad idea. Collaborative coin join is a protocol that we're working on, and it will ultimately end up with large anonymous UTXOs, which makes the problem with having so a UTXO stands for unspent transaction output. It is a very important concept. If you're not a developer, well, actually, if you're just a general person who uses Bitcoin, any of the forks of Bitcoin, you should try and understand what a UTXO is. It's the thing that you actually spend. Bitcoins don't actually exist; they're represented as UTXOs. That's that's the gist of it. But the problem when you're trying to use an application like wallet.fullstack.cash or really any web application is that those UTXOs are a scaling problem. They make it very hard for the wallet to scale with lots of users, because I don't need to go any deeper than that. And so by reducing the number of UTXOs, it makes the wallet function better, but that also tends to reduce privacy. And so this consolidating coin join, or I'm sorry, collaborative coin join protocol, it lets people interact and create a coin join transaction, and then over as you do a series of these, if you start with a wallet that has a bunch of UTXOs, after every stage, it should ultimately end up with large anonymous UTXOs, and it should solve this dust problem, and so it should be scalable and anonymous, and not suffer from the dust problem. But right now it's vaporware. It's just a rough protocol. We're working on it. Cash Fusion exists today. You can use it today. And so, but there's a lot of people in the industry that in the Bitcoin Cash industry that are worried about this problem of financial privacy. We have solutions; they're getting better. I think it's the best of both worlds, because privacy coins like Monero and Zcash, they've had inflation bugs, and because they're anonymous, nobody can detect it. Whereas Bitcoin is auditable, and you can detect those types of bugs very easily. So by using these obfuscation protocols like CoinJoin, you get the best of both worlds. You have an auditable um, ledger, but the people using it can actually remain anonymous.
So do you think that there's still the possibility then of these forensic software companies just dusting into like these services to try to see inputs and outputs so they can kind of get an idea of how they work and see if there's going to be a way to track things through? Because I know that's kind of what they do now is they just throw a bunch in and
Mm-hmm.
see where it comes out and see if they can start to build patterns and algos around it to reverse kind of engineer it. But if it's open source, right, wouldn't they be able to do this anyway? So like how, I guess this is more of a technical thing and this probably has to
Mm-hmm.
do with encryption
It's a
um,
great question.
or cryptography. So this might be a little bit over, and I know we hit the 12 o'clock mark right now, so I don't want to detract too far from the main topic, but it was kind of it did
Yeah.
spark my interest.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because yeah, so a dusting attack. So dust is specifically 546 satoshis. That's the smallest amount of Bitcoin that you can send. If you try and send a transaction that's any smaller than that, the network will reject it because it's too small. It's not worth dealing with, and that number will probably change in the future. But it's been around for a number of years. It's probably going to be around for a number of years. So that's what dust is. And so a dust attack is when someone will just randomly send, or like a it doesn't matter who it is, anybody can do it. Uh, Sends dust to like new transactions. They just look at new transactions happening on the blockchain. They send a dust to every address, and by doing this, the idea is that they can then follow. They can then better connect the dots between the different addresses and the flows and map them out better. And so this is a very effective technique for chain analysis. And what we are seeing and it happens all the time on Bitcoin Cash. We see I have a ton of dust in my wallet. So in the case of Electron Cash, when it sees that, I'm sorry, of Cash Shuffle, because they both operate in the Electron Cash wallet. In the case of Cash Shuffle, it will freeze those dust coins and it won't let you spend them by default. You can override it if you want. In the case of Cash Fusion, uh, it just fuses that dust and it all works out. Because basically the way Cash Fusion works is it uses so many large transactions and does so many transactions, it basically just eats the dust, and it's not an effective attack vector by doing this. And it's one of the only CoinJoin protocols that I know that is resistant to this dust attack. It's the only
Yeah,
one I'm aware of. I don't even
interesting.
think Wasabi Wallet can withstand a dust attack.
I didn't know that was a technology that was being employed. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is actually pretty cool because this dust problem is a really big problem. It's a really hard to solve problem.
And but it's not for the daily user or the guy who's buying $150 a month, right? Like
Right.
he's probably not worried because he's using Coinbase or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it's for these people who don't have like are in places where they can't have this all goes back to free speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
censorship and having censorship resistance, which there's
Mm-hmm.
a question I want to bring up to you right now. It's a good transition because it's kind of on that same free speech app. This goes back to like if you were mentioning like memo cache, right, where you have a Twitter like blockchain app and one of the questions is like, well, since you can't shut it off and you can't stop people from posting what they want to, you're going to see things that you may not want to be exposed to. How
Mm-hmm.
can an individual, or is this technology not there yet, that you can filter out certain things? Like you don't want to see anything with pornography,
Mm-hmm.
or you just don't want to see election stuff, right? Like I know
Mm-hmm.
this is maybe not, you don't have the hundreds or millions of users like you do on Twitter, but
Mm-hmm.
is there a way to keep yourself being exposed to the things that you don't want to, or is it just, oh, it's free for all right now, good luck?
I mean, the answer is yes, but this is a really nuanced question because um, again, it stems from a philosophy, a core philosophy. So when the internet came out, it was free, and the idea was that if there's something that you don't want to see, then the onus is on you to block. And I really like so on the case of memo.cash, you can still block people. You can still not see, and you choose, who to subscribe to in your feed. So the choice is yours. The content's there, but there are tools for you as an individual to use to control what you see and don't see. And my opinion is that that's the right way to do it. What we're seeing play out in Twitter and YouTube is that people want to cry foul to a state actor, and then that state actor wants to bubble wrap social media. So now you're seeing, you know more and more the onus of who controls what you see has moved from you as the individual to the platform, and now more to the government. And so we're seeing, like, basically Twitter and YouTube get bubble wrapped, and this nice safe social media where you can't see anything you don't like. And because of that, the value, in my opinion, is largely lost. And So this is why I think I think the trend's going to continue. We're going to continue to see deplatforming and censorship, and we're going to continue to see this, like, very vanilla blah, social media. Probably Twitter and YouTube will ultimately be nationalized, in effect, if
Not
not,
at the fault of the companies at all.
yeah, not at the fault of the companies. But this is why I think it's such a paradigm shift with memo.cash, where it's using the blockchain. There's no way to censor that. It puts the onus back on you as the individual to control what you see and don't see. And in the case of message.fullstack.cash with our community feed, that's an example of using our merit and our filtering on the front end. We're pulling the raw data from the blockchain, but we're controlling what we show. And OpenBazaar did the same thing, where anybody, it's an open protocol, anybody can do anything on OpenBazaar, buy and sell anything. But if you go to Obi1, the company, and run the official app, they have a not safe for work flag that's checked by default, and so they're not going to show anything to you unless you uncheck that box that they have marked as not safe for work. So again, like, the big philosophical question here is, who's responsible for what you see? Is it you, or do you want to delegate that to some state actor?
Yeah, and that's tough because that comes down to the age-old question of that people don't want to take, some people don't want to take full responsibility for themselves.
Or
Or,
they just don't want to think that hard. I mean,
I mean, it's a
I
lot of
get
work,
it.
it's work. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with managing crypto all these years, right? Like it's energy. It takes energy to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy. And you have to go out of your way to do it. But at the same time, these things that exist, like, you know, attacks and, violence, uh, right now you do the same thing. If it comes on TV, you turn it off. If it comes on your feed, you can block it or whatever. So I think it's basically the same thing. It's the real, you're mimicking the real world. You don't go to the places that you don't want to, to take in some of that stuff. Now,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you can still like direct your feed so that you have control over like what's coming in, and if people are retweeting or reposting stuff that you don't like, you can unfollow those people, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you start to whittle your feed down. Now, I know in the meantime, you're going to be exposed to some things that you're probably not going to like. But that's the same thing. Like if you go to the grocery store and two people get into a fight, one guy pulls out a gun, you didn't want that experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's part of life. And
Yep.
you were just going to the grocery store, and the two guys in the parking lot got into a fight. So like nobody asked for it. You didn't want to be exposed to it, and you can get in your car and go away or whatever. And like, but like last week, somebody broke into my garage while I was going upstairs. Like I left it halfway open, and I came outside, and there was a lady with two bicycles standing out on the sidewalk, and then um, I walked across the grass to the driveway, and I noticed a backpack on the ground. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, and this is like 11 o'clock at night, just after 11 o'clock at night. I was like, oh shit, there's somebody in my garage, right? It could have been a really bad situation. Turned out to be okay. He didn't take anything, and I caught him beforehand. But
Wow.
like these are I didn't want that experience, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I could have avoided it by closing my garage when I walked out. So like there are things that we can do to avoid situations that we don't want to be a part of, but it is life and you never know what you're gonna get, right? So I think it goes back to the same thing. This is just it should mimic more of real life, and I think that that's what people need to just, you know, take into account. Now, how do you stop an 11-year-old or a 9-year-old who can get access to a little bit of crypto and or maybe an app on the parent's phone? Same thing happens now. How can they be a user? That's a very good question. Like, I don't know if a 9-year-old should have access to Twitter, like on their own. So, I mean, there are things that we do need to protect people from in general, but overall, I'd rather see it be open and have parents be responsible or have the
Yeah.
individuals be responsible. So, um, yeah, I think there's a lot of things we could do, and I think the less that we do, the better.
Yeah. 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 I agree. I agree. I mean, we're living in an age of government overreach, and the trend's not stopping. So anybody watching this, they have to ask themselves, are you going to take responsibility for your life? Are you going to are you going to use cryptography and cryptocurrency to take responsibility for your own money and your own privacy and your own free? Like, I want to live in a world where it is simply not possible for a government to stop someone from sharing information, because that's what they did in the Holocaust. If you go back to the World War II, and a lot of the when you ask yourself the question like, how did things devolve so far? It's because the government had an absolute iron grip on communication. They controlled all the radio, they controlled all the news, they controlled all the newspapers. They could stop anything they want. They could promote anything they wanted. And
It happens
right
in
now
all
we're in
great
a
tyrannies.
right, and we're in a very delicate situation. I hope and we need to remove that ability from governments, if we want to prevent the possibility. I'm not saying we're going to actually descend that far. I'm saying I want to remove the possibility that we could even descend that far. And it all has everything to do with communication and whether you as an individual can get private communication to the person you're trying to get it to. If you can do those two things, then you can organize and you can coordinate and you can fight, and that's how it should be. And so the big thing that I'm looking for, that I'm going to be looking for over the next 50 years, if we have another like world war or chaos, it's going to come from governments controlling communication, and we need to be very careful about that. We need, as individuals, we need to enforce our right to communication.
Well, and part of that is we communicate with our dollars or our money, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we travel and we purchase things online, uh, that is a form of communication too, and so that's why I think this is such a huge topic that unsensible money is what got me out of working in the pharma industry. So I saw the change for something that could help people across the globe as opposed to um, in a way that yes, medicine does help people. Don't get me wrong. There's been great advancements in medicine, but the politics behind medicine now have turned such that it doesn't feel like it's the same sort of an industry. And the
Right.
problem is money, which which is lobbying, which don't get me wrong, the tech companies do it too. That's how they get things passed. The tech companies spend more money on lobbying than anybody, and it shows because they are able to get things done and they don't get fined as much as the banks do, even though they're moving billions of dollars around too. So this is very, it's a very interesting age to be alive for sure, especially with all of the things that are going on around us. And I agree with you that communication has to remain free and open. And and this is a great way to do it. I think Bitcoin Cash is doing a marvelous job at it throughout all of the turmoil that's been going and swirling around it. Thanks for coming on and explaining to us today about the fork, what you've been working on with the permissionless software foundation, as well as full stack cash, and your blog, which is awesome. Like I if I had more free time, I would love to make like a version of my website that is like off of unhosted essentially, or hosted
Mm-hmm.
through IPFS. Something very simple, just as a
Mm-hmm.
practice, because we are streaming on YouTube right now, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like this is part of the transition, and it's kind of weird to have being in the middle of it as it's happening, but of the fact that we are taking a part of this community, and we are making a stance, is definitely something that people in the future are going to appreciate. So I appreciate your time and your energy, and all the things that you're doing for this community before it was Bitcoin Cash, and on into the future. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us today about that we didn't get to, or some other thoughts, or and then if not, just like how you mentioned your blog, but how can people
Mm-hmm.
get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I am available on Twitter at Chris Troutner, on Telegram at Chris Troutner, one word. That's probably a good way to find me, and then you can find my I spend a lot of time on GitHub, on Memo.cash, library. All my YouTube videos are mirrored on Library TV. I recommend anybody who puts videos on YouTube to use Library. It's quickly becoming the uncensorable version of YouTube, just like Memo.cash is the uncensorable version of Twitter, and member.cash is the uncensorable version of Reddit. So we're definitely seeing a trend, but it's going to take people uh, stepping up and just choosing to use protocols over platforms.
Cool. Don't forget to check out his blog at Trout's blog. Wait, Trout, was it troutsblog.com?
Yeah, troutsblog.com.
Yeah, yeah, check that out too. Um, Again, thanks for being here today. I'm glad we were able to work through the very disappointing technical difficulties for 2 days. But now I think it's not my machine, so thank goodness I don't have a paperweight or a flotation device, and I think we'll be able to fix this problem. And thanks to Zoom for not cutting me off at 40 minutes today. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
maybe it's like a free weekend thing, or who knows. Lockdowns again. Maybe lockdowns are coming.
Yeah, there you go.
Either way, I enjoyed myself today. I really appreciated again you coming on. I'm gonna shoot you an email about something I think you should take a look at that might be helpful for the community. It's
Great.
there's a group down here in San Diego. I'll just give them a quick plug. They're called the Open Index Protocol, and they are essentially building Google for like a search engine for
Mm,
IPFS and decentralized storage, which is one
very
of the
cool.
things that we don't really have right now. It's because all the stuff is there, but it's not indexed.
Right.
So imagine being able to now get access to an indexed IPFS. It's going to make people's lives so much easier, and it's decentralized. So I'll send that over. And thanks again, everybody. This has been a wonderful meetup, learning about Bitcoin Cash, what it's doing, and where it's going. And I look forward to seeing what happens after the 15th. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Right on. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.